Let's begin by downloading Blender. Blender is the free and open source software that allows you to create very cool 3D animations, even 2D animations, video games, and so much more. So if you go to the website blender.org, you can download your own free copy. You can also use it for anything you want. Now, most of the Hollywood studios use a 3D software called Maya, but more and more studios are starting to use Blender. Blender has a lot of robust options to help you create different types of things, and in my personal opinion, it can compete with Maya on many levels. So let's start by downloading the software. You can scroll up to the top and select this option here. You download the version for your computer. It can be for the Mac or PC. And what we're going to do now, I've already downloaded the software. You can select the button to download and then follow along with me after you've completed. Let's open the software. When you first open Blender, your default screen is going to show you your version. So we're on version 2.78. However, Blender is constantly upgrading and updating. People from all over the world use Blender and contribute to Blender to help make it better. But even though there are new versions coming out all the time, a lot of the basics are still the same. So let's get started. I'm just going to click off to the side, and it allows me to see my entire screen from the user perspective here in the 3D space. So when you open Blender, you start off, your default options are with a camera, a cube, and a lamp. I'm going to click on this plus button here in the upper right hand corner, and that will enable me to open up this panel for transform options. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom and make sure I turn on my screencast keys so you can follow along with everything I do. If you look over in the lower left hand corner, you can see everything I do with my mouse or different keys that I press, and follow along with me. So right now, I can see that there is a yellow line around this cube, so that means that the cube is highlighted or selected. Now, if I wanted to, I could move this cube up and down on the Z or Z axis. You notice that there is a small blue arrow. If you select that, you can kind of drag up and you're kind of moving the cube up and down on the Z axis. And if I want to undo that, I can just Command or Control Z to undo that. You can also move on the Y axis, and that is the green line. So if I want to undo that and move it back to its original spot, and the X axis. So you can move inside of that 3D space with your objects. It's very important when you're working in a 3D program that you start to think about how things look from every single angle. If you want to select something inside of Blender, this is on the default setup. If you're used to other programs, like for example, if I want to select this camera and I right click, I'm probably going to feel a little frustrated because I don't see that yellow line highlighting the camera. All that's happening here is that I'm moving that 3D cursor you see all around the space. But I want to select the camera. So it's important to remember that inside of Blender, I'm actually going to right click. That will select objects. So I'm selecting the camera now, and if I wanted to, I could go over and select the lamp. If you ever want a summary of all of the objects inside of your scene, you can look over in this panel here for the scene, and it shows you we have a camera, a cube, and a lamp. Now, if we keep staying on this side, you can also notice in our scene, these are our rendering options. If you want to render a still image, let's click on this button, and this is actually just going to render a still image of our cube in three-dimensional space. So that gives us a still image. If we had some animation happening with the cube, we would select the animation option and have our start frames and our end frames set. Right now, the default is starting at frame 1, going up to frame 250, and our resolution is in HD, but it's at half of the size of HD. You can increase or decrease that as you want to. Let's bounce over to some of these others. This is for if you will discuss this more in detail, but this deals with freestyle layers. So if you want to have a 2D effect with sketches around your 3D images, really cool stuff. If you're in anime, you will be in this panel quite a bit. These are different options for your scene. This is your environment, for example, your world, what color the background is, and things of that nature. These are settings for each object. So right now we have the lamp selected, and I'm going to go back into the 3D space so you can kind of follow along better. So if you look under this panel, this enables you to go inside of different views. So right now we're going to go back to the 3D view. So we go back to where we started from. There are also object constraints and things of that nature for the lamp. And if we go to cube, there'll be different options. For example, you can add modifiers, etc. So this is just kind of a quick walkthrough of all that you can do in Blender. Now, up here, you have options to scale and rotate and change different things of your object. You can also add shapes into your space. So if you, for example, if we were to click on cylinder, it would add a cylinder, and notice how that cylinder went where the 3D cursor is. So if I click here and I move my 3D cursor here and I click add cone, it will add a cone in that space, and so on and so forth. So when you want to add shapes, this is one option. There are also keyboard shortcuts too, but this is where you can also just click on the options and the buttons right here. You have different types of relationships that you can set, animation, keyframes, physics, and the grease pencil. Now the grease pencil, some artists actually use this to mark off things, like if you want to mark off the space between, for example, the cube. If I click on the draw, the cube and the cone, you can start to just mark off spaces or make notes, like maybe we don't want to, when we have the next artist that comes on this project, we want them to erase that. That's one way you can work with the grease pencil. However, you can also use the grease pencil to enhance and create your own 2D animations. So there are so many cool options with that. And as you can see, you can change the color or the feel of it. So if we want to change the color of that, there are different options. If you scroll up this way, you could change the color of your stroke. So it's changing it to a lighter gray, but let's say we wanted it to be red. We could select a red right there. Let's go to File, User Preferences, and let's take a look and see what we want to change in our interface option. One of my favorite changes to make, and I'll close out of this to show you an example for a moment, then we'll come right back to it. Right now, if I zoom in, it's just zooming into the center. But my preference is to actually zoom into an object. So let's say, for example, I wanted to just zoom into that cone. Well, I'm hitting the middle mouse button, by the way, the wheel, to zoom in and out. So if I wanted to just zoom into different objects based on where my mouse was, I could go to File, User Preferences, and select Zoom to Mouse Position. And the other thing you want to do is make sure you save your user settings. So that's the one I want to save for now. So now if I zoom into this part of the cylinder or this part of the cone, notice if I zoom in really close, it almost looks like it disappeared, but we're actually just in very close. So we're kind of zooming in, zooming out. And if you want to move around the space, this is why you need that 3-button mouse. The middle mouse button comes in handy, but you can actually hold it down and move around the space. So I'm just holding my middle mouse wheel button down and I'm rotating all around the 3D space. That enables us to get the basics of the panels inside of Blender. Thank you for watching.